Hey guys, this is Bebe872 and here we are! Set 9 is about to go live and I will show you exactly how you are supposed to play each champion, into what itemizations, into what direction. And first, we're going to start off with Renekton. Now, Renekton is a build-up for Shurima, so you want to use a Renekton 2-star with Bruisers as a frontline as a build-up process to build into a level 7 or 8 Azir 2-star or Kazandi 2-star endgame composition. You do want to aim after 5 or 7 Shurimas when you can, and normally the itemizations that are good on Renekton are stuff like Time Resolves and Ionics because he has a very strong ratio and he does a lot of magic damage. His 3-star buildup is however very weak because it's not really that tanky, nor does it do that much damage, but the buildup process is very good. Maokai is a unit that's actually very weak for the build-up and for the 3-star like of value. He becomes tanky once you give him the Shadow Owl synergy, so if you go for a reroll Maokai into a Shadow Owl finish with a Viego main carry, that's when he's strong, but you can just slam any source of tank itemizations on him, it's okay. Viego is one of the main 1-cost reroll carries. His 3-star variation is very powerful. His ultimate allows his auto attacks to charge and get much more stronger, which is like a better version of Jax if we compare it to set 8. So you want to give him itemizations like Time Resolves, Guinsus, and Bloodthirsters for the healing and scaling, but you can give him other flat damage itemizations such as Ionics and Rabadons too. It is best to go for a Shadow Owl composition when going for Viego altogether. Now, Malzahar is actually a very weak unit. His ultimate has a very short range, so it doesn't really hit much, nor does it do a lot of damage. So since he doesn't do much damage, he's just a filler unit for the Void composition to make sure you have 3 Voids and a bunch of Sorks online. Okay, now we're gonna go into Bebe. Bebe 1, 2, and 3-star, just as a frontliner, is really squishy and not that strong. It'll melt down really fast. It won't guarantee some wins because she is a Yordle. She has 4-star potential. However, once you hit Bebe 4-star, that's when this unit pops off. Her CC value and her damage value and her tank value is off the charts, and she is very powerful if you tag her with a Talia 3-star because her ultimate is a knock-up, and the Talia does extra bonus damage to knock up units. A Bebe 4-star is one of the strongest 1-cost 3-star tanks. However, Bebe 3-star is very weak, so be very careful if you want to go for Teemo 4-star as your main carry. Samira is also quite weak for a 3-star value, and the build-up is usually better to go for Jhin, the other ranged damage carry. Even in a challenger deck, you don't really use her that well because Kalista is just better as a unit. So I don't really recommend going for her too much, but if you have an early 2-star, you may choose to give her some itemizations and she will do okay, but she is the type of unit that you always want to take out for something else later in the game. Irelia is one of the strongest 1-cost units to build up with because her shield value, her tank value, and her damage output is very, very high. You can give her any itemizations regarding tanks such as Time Resolves, Gargoyles, Warmogs, and so on. You can also choose to 3-star her just for the tank value, but never forget, 1-cost 3-star tanks do not have much value in the late game because they get one-shotted anyways. They don't really buy that much time, but for the early mid game, especially for stage 3 and 4, she's going to give you a lot of value. Orianna is also a very weak unit just like Malzahar. She's a Sork, Piltover, usually used for a synergy filler, not really for a main carry, mostly because her ultimate AI is very bad. Her ultimate has a very short range, and if there are no melee units, she has no method of dealing damage to the enemy backline. Now we're going to look into Jhin. Jhin is actually one of the strongest build-up range units. He has the most damage output because he has a very delicious ultimate. And since he has a very high AD ratio on his ultimate, you want to make sure to give him Infinity Edge. And his Ionia bonus gives him a lot of flat AD. So itemizations like Runaan's can be much more powerful for a tempo. Of course, Guinsus is a must itemization for late game, so if you don't make Guinsus, that could be a problem. But Runaan's IE is usually the stronger variations to build this champion. You can choose to go for a 3-star, but it's only strong mid-game and it falls off very hard during the late game. Kayle is a very risky champion. The problem with Kayle is that her buildup is very weak. She has one of the weakest buildups, so you will not be able to do much damage. But after you 3-star her and get the Radiant itemization to Masha synergy online, you do become much more stronger. You do want to go for full damage. You don't want to go for Guin's Hex Tech because you'll lack DPS. You want to go full damage so you can melt down the enemy really fast. So you want to go for Guin's and Jewel Gauntlet, or maybe Guin's and Giant Slayers. That's what you want to do. It says filler for Duelist here, but she is not really a filler. She is very strong for the late game. And you do really want to make sure to go for a 3-star Kale into a 4-star like a Poppy like Frontline to make the composition work. Cassiopeia is a unit that is usually used as a filler build-up for Shurimas. So the unit herself does a fair amount of damage, but not as much as Jhin. I feel the best itemization for Cassiopeia isn't blue buff. She doesn't really benefit that much from blue buff. You'd rather go for Guinzu so she has more auto attacks, and she ults really fast with just a blue buff anyways. So I do recommend just going for an itemization that is really good for building up in the Zir, which is Guinzu's and Giant Slayers. Tristana 4-star is actually a very powerful gunner carry amongst the one cost like a 3-stars. The DPS output is very high. I do worry that the build-up process, however, though, is very weak until she becomes 4-starred. 3-star Tristana should not be good enough because the frontline is very awkward. You do want to go for a Bastion frontline with Maokai or Kassadin to buy time in the front, while Tristana stacks Guinzu's, and with her high damage output, she takes down the opponents. But the problem is that Tristana herself is also very squishy, so she can get assassinated by stuff like enemy Yasuo's or Kai'Sa's or random like a Zeri procs into a Dino ultimate. So you gotta be careful about that. You're not invincible, but it still is very powerful for the mid game. Cho'Gath is also a synergy filler, fairly decent for the early mid game, but nothing too powerful and only used for synergies up until the late game. And now if you were to move on to the 2-cost units, Galio is a decent unit to buy time for an Invoker or a Demacia buildup, so you can go for 7 Demacias and use him as a Radiant tank item holder, or you can go for 6 Invokers and maybe 3-star Galio for the extra 1000 HP frontline potential. However, he's not as tanky as you might expect him to be. I first expected Galio to be an unkillable tank, but he actually melts much more faster than you might expect, so do be careful when using Galio as a build-up or an endgame tank line. Vi is a very fair unit, usually used with Pilt Overs. She is more of a synergy filler. She doesn't really have good item efficiency. You'd rather have these itemizations such as Warmouse on Sejuani because Sejuani scales much more nicer. I feel like she's much more for synergies because her stats overall is okay as a tank line for the early mid, but not really game winning. Set is actually a very interesting unit because he does have his own hero augment. I do notice that Set 3-stars CC duration time is 2.5 seconds. You can actually completely stun lock an enemy carry with Set if you just put in the right location. The itemizations, because he has a very decent AP ratio, time resolves, Jewel Gauntlet, and Hand of Justice, should be very fair. Oh wait, I noticed that the writing is wrong there. Right next to Set it says 3-star weak, decent build-up. Best with Azir items early, but I mean 3-stars are very strong, the build-up process is very decent, and usually if you want to itemize Set, you keep him till the end, but these itemizations are much more better to give to Yasuo and Kai'Sa instead. In the case of Soraka, you do want to make sure to have Guinzus and Archangel so her healing can scale and she can spam the healing value. Her build-up process is quite decent, but her 3-star value is not that high. Usually she is used for a synergy filler for good synergies like Targons and Invokers. And now we're going to look on to Swain. Swain is an amazing tank, especially for multicast and sorcerer-like compositions because he has a very decent synergies like Strategist and Sorks. Regardless of his synergies, he has a very amazing tank value on his ultimate. If you give him any tank itemizations like Gargoyles, Time Resolves, or Redemption, he will do his role. I recommend him a lot. Ashe is a good filler for a Deadeye composition, usually used to get Freljords, but her build-up process is very decent because her overall stats and damage output, and especially her debuff, is quite high in value. Her debuff also synergizes with Sejuani passive, which does allow chilled units to take more bonus damage. Warwick, I think, is a very weak unit. I do notice that it's very popular. The build-up process for Warwick is very strong, however, though, because it's very hard to kill a Warwick during the mid game, but it's very easy to take down a Warwick during the late game. Zed is a very popular 2-cost 3-star choice. You never forget to give him IE, Infinity Edge, so that his ultimate can crit, and that's where his damage comes from. Because you put IE, you want to give Hand Adjusted for the extra crit damage and the lifesteal potential, and time resolves to make Zed tankier while doing more damage is a very wise choice to go for. You do want to go for full Slayers when going for Zed. And now we have our strongest 2-cost 3-stars coming in soon. And in PvE, the multicast synergy is very overtuned, so they do too much damage. So Talia and Teemo are the strongest 2-cost 3-stars to go for. You just need to build the flat damage onto Talia. You don't really need mana, but you can choose to give mana if you want. But when you go for Talia, you want to pair her up with Boppy 4-star for the AoE damage value. In the case of Teemo 4, he just one-shots most boards. You need to bring at least a 4-cost 3-star to deal with Teemo, or another a 3-cost 3-star that can assassinate Teemo 4-star instantly. The healing value and his damage output is just insane, and his shrooms can stack damage. So it's not like a duration issue, it just stacks damage. So he can multiply damage based on the multicast, which makes him far too overpowered. The itemization is blue buff, so you can ult instantly. You do want a crit ratio, and the healing from Hextech is very vital. Kled is also a very decent Slayer carry, used right next with Zed, so you can go for triple Z, Kled, Zed carry with IE on Zed and Guinsus on Kled. That's one way to go at it, but he does have a weakness of being weak against opponents that have a lot of damage. So when he demounts and is charging his ultimate, he actually stuns himself. So every time he charges onto his horse, and then every time he falls back, he keeps stunning himself, being unable to attack. And I feel like that's his greatest a weakness, and that's the reason why opponents with sustainable damage do counter Kled in that aspect. Jinx, I feel, is a unit that doesn't really do any damage whatsoever. I feel like it's not really worth itemizing Jinx, but I feel IE and Guinsus would be the best way to go at it because she's a gunner and her ultimates do a benefit from a critting, but she's mostly a filler unit for Zeri. And Kassadin is an amazing tank line. His ratios as a tank is insanely high, so if you itemize him with anything like Time Resolves, Redemption, Wormmonks, he will perform very well, amazing build-up, and he also has decent synergies like Voids and Bastions. How Garen works is that you have 3 Demeshas, and you make sure to give him 1 slot open so he can get the Radiant itemization, and the other itemization is going to be Guinsus and a lifesteal item like Bloodthirsters. You do need a Pandora's box because this composition is strong only when you have multiple Zeeks. So you want to have at least 6 Zeeks so that Garen can spin infinitely and one-shot enemies down instantly. Darius, I feel like, is the weakest 3-cost because he's supposed to do a lot of damage jumping around, but he just doesn't. He does not have any DPS anywhere near one-shotting any opponents, so he's gonna get stuck on a tank and he's also really squishy besides the fact that even though he's a juggernaut, he melts down really fast, so I don't really recommend Darius much. Rek'Sai is an amazing unit that works well with Time Resolves because you do want more AP ratios on Rek'Sai so his healing is higher, and his damage output to units that are under 60% HP is true damage, allowing him to only have 2 Time Resolves to just one-shot enemies down instantly. He is usually paired with Lissandra, and Lissandra 3-star I feel is one of the best units in the game in terms of versatility because every composition can actually fit a Lissandra in, and her damage output is really high. Not only is her damage output high, she also applies AoE bonus damage to anyone that gets caught in, and I feel like that is an amazing effect to have. Vel'Koz and Sona. As I said, multicasts are overpowered in PvE, so Vel'Koz 3-star just one-shots most boards instantly. The enemy will need something really tanky like a Baron, or maybe like a Garen 3-star that has infinite lifesteal to deal with it. Sona also does a lot of AoE damage while buffing your team as well too with the multicast like a bonus. Even though her ratios on her damage output seems low, she actually does much more DPS than you might expect. Akushan is more of the funny ones. I feel like the build-up process in the 3-star is decent, but nothing like worth like forcing. He does work really well with IE. You want to give him IE because you want his ultimate to crit, because his ultimate ratio, if there's a high AD ratio on your ultimate, you want to give IE. If there isn't, and if you rely on auto attacks, you want to give Deathblade. That's how it goes. So you'll probably give IE and Guinsu's and one other itemization of your choice. And Echo, I feel, is very powerful if you get him 3-star. It's very rare to go for a rogue 3-star deck, but he does have one-shot potential because his ratios are very high. But I would say it's very risky because you never know where rogues are going to jump into. Jace is a Zeke or a Chalice filler because his role is to buff his allies while doing a small amount of bonus counter damage, usually very well fit with Zeri to buff Zeri. So his itemizations will be mostly support. We can also add in redemptions to heal the backline so the backline does not get assassinated. Karma is a funny like a champion for sure. 6 Invokers is the best way, but you actually don't really need blue buff. So I wrote blue buff, Jewel Gauntlet, and Giant Slayers there just for the build-up process, but you don't always need a blue buff. You can actually just go Jewel Gauntlet, Giant Slayer, Hextech Gunblade, or Jewel Gauntlet, Giant Slayer, Giant Slayer, because if you have 6 Invokers, she will ult really fast, regardless of the blue buff anyways, so you don't have to worry. Katarina is usually paired with Zed into like rogue Slayers. Mostly Slayers is important compared to rogues. You can also pair her up with Echo and go for Echo 3-star same time as well too to assassinate the backline. You do want some damage, but having lifesteal is more important so that your Katarina just keeps on lifestealing and surviving. Never forget Katarina's range is limited, so there's a chance that she might miss her ultimate. You want to make sure that that doesn't happen by making her as tanky and living as long as possible. Kalista is the strongest build-up, I feel, for this set because there's so many Guinsu carries and no unit is better to hold Guinsus than Kalista. Kalista can use itemizations like Giant Slayers and Hand of Justice better because her damage output is an AD AP ratio hybrid. So her auto attacks do some AD damage, but her AD ratio is not as high as other 3-cost AD carries. And she has some AP ratios, same thing, not as high. So you want itemizations that can raise both, and Giant Slayers and Hand of Justice raises both AD and AP, which maximizes the efficiency and the damage output for Kalstar. Also, her crit applies on each individual spear if you give her a Jewel Gauntlet. So if you go for a Jewel Gauntlet, then her auto attacks, each auto attacks has a chance to crit, and the damage calculation applies once the unit is in execution range. I feel the build-up process for Kalista is one of the best because challenger build-ups are very powerful and they have a decent endgame. Taric is a good tank line filler for Sorks, and he's also a Bastion and a Targon too, so he can be an amazing like a synergy filler while giving a decent amount of frontline value at the same time. And now we have our 4-cost. 4-cost carries are mostly the protagonists of this set. Gwen is mostly used in a Slayer comp. You want to build into full Slayers more than Shadow Isles, and you want to make sure that her damage output comes first. You want to make sure that she has enough lifesteal so that every time she ults, she can one-shot an enemy and heal up back to full. That's the goal. So you do not want to build into tank itemizations. Mostly pure damage. Nasus is a pure tank, regardless of his description. I mean, there are some people that think Nasus is a damage carry and go for Guinsus, but his role is to just suck damage and buy as much time as possible for your teammates. His role isn't really to do DPS, so if you make a 3-star Nasus, it doesn't do damage, and it just gets sliced down by enemy Guinsus regardless. Lux is amazing. What you have to remember, Lux, that you want Hextech Gunblade no matter what, so that you can heal the Lux, who is very squishy, while healing your frontline at the same time, and that will allow her more opportunities to spam her ultimate while staying alive. The 3-star like a setup is very strong. Written in the description is wrong, incorrect. You just need to focus on making sure that she has one slot open for Demashas and just give her the blue buff, Hextech Gunblade, or you can take out a blue buff and go for Jewel Gauntlet instead if you feel like you have enough mana. Sejuani is also a very decent unit to add in. You want to make sure that she has Warmog, so because she has a very high HP ratio, and also a Protector's Vow, so she can ult faster while being tankier at the same time as well too. The description on the right is also wrong as well too. Apologies. You don't need to read that. Just focus on the fact that the Freljord synergy is amazing, and Sejuani is important because of her passive. Her passive allows chilled units to take bonus damage based on her maximum HP. That's the reason why we want to add Sejuani in, and that's the reason why Sejuani is so important for late game. Urgot is one of the tankiest damage dealers you'll have. He does a very fair amount of damage while giving a fair amount of tank value. That's actually not that much lower if we compare it to a Shen or a Nasus. He works in every deck because he doesn't really need his synergies. However, if you have a good Zon effect that can chem mod the Urgot, he'll become very difficult to deal with for sure. Zeri is a type of AD carry that's very strong for the that's very strong for the late game when you get everything online. We get Senna online, we get your Zeeks, we get 6 gunners. But for the mid game at level 7 or 8, that is when she's at her weakest, so be very careful. You want Armor Shred because it's very difficult to add in Freljords with Zeri decks usually. And then you can go for Guinsus and Texted Gunblade, or if you want more damage, Guinsus into Deathblade. Kaisa is a very powerful AP nuker that can be used in every composition in the game, just like Lissandra. So you can actually just pair Lissandra and Kaisa together in any deck, and it'll be strong no matter what you do. That's what I like to do in a build different decks. So just go for Kaisas and just go for a bunch of Lissandras. Jarvan has the best CC in the game because his AI is really good. He really does ult during the largest clump, which has very high odds of hitting the enemy main like a carry. He is usually best with a Shurima deck, where you give him a Shurima Spat, and it allows, and if you give Warmogs, he'll send for a bonus HP, and just keep on ulting while healing constantly. Shen is an amazing tank and a synergy filler for the composition that can buy time. I don't think he's one of the best, but he's not that bad, and is usually paired with Taric. Those two are a combi. Azir is one of the best AP consistent damage carries. You can just give him Guinsus, Jewel Gone for the damage, or maybe Giant Slayers, and Hextech Gunblade, and he will do a lot of DPS over time. I feel like he is one of the best carries you can go for with build different. You can go for Kaisa and Azir for sustainable damage because you don't really need the Shurimas. They do very similar roles. And Aphelios is a very fun champion to talk about. I do like going for Guinsus, Deathblade, and Runans. Runans I feel like is a must because Deadeye, Freljord comps have a lot of AoE damage, but they don't have good cleanup. So if you go for Runans, Aphelios will have really good cleanup. They can also hit those squishy, low HP targets in the back. Aphelios is a champion that's strong mid, but weak late. Very different from Zeri, right? Zeri was weak mid and strong late, and this is because he doesn't have huge amounts of damage scaling. So if the enemy hits level 9 and has a lot of units, 9 units, Aphelios needs to take them down one by one. So the more units the enemy has, the longer it takes for Aphelios to take it down. And if the enemy has more damage than you, then it will be a very difficult matchup. That's how it gets. Yasuo, when you build Yasuo, what you have to know is that he's usually using an Ionia Challenger deck, but you gotta focus on making sure that he keeps on lifestealing. So you want one lifesteal item like Hand of Justice or Bloodthirsters into IE for crit potential on his ultimate and time resolves just to make him tankier with that plus 25 armor while giving him damage at the same time. And now let's finish off with the 5 cost. Dinger is best with Guinsus because if Dinger has higher attack speed, the Dinger's turret also increases in attack speed as well too. For turret upgrades in competitive games, I don't recommend them because they cost too much gold. It's usually more important fighting upgrades. But I personally do like Goldemancer to snowball win streaks, or maybe like a Shrink Ray to make sure the enemy has very low resistances, or even Reparo so that you can frontline the turret and use it as a tank line. K'Sante is probably the best 5 cost in terms of combat value because he has a chance to one-shot tanks. You want to give him at least a Protector's Vow and one more tier item. I gave him Redemption here for a tank value so he can ult instantly at the beginning of the fight. and a Warmogs to make sure that he doesn't die too fast. He is the champion for Shurimas. That's how you make Shurima decks god tier during the late game. If you end up with K'Sante with 7 Shurimas, K'Sante is very hard to kill, while he is able to annihilate enemy like a hardcore, like a tanks, making him one of the best champions in the game. Aatrox is quite decent if you use him as a carry for a Slayer deck, but usually people just use him as a filler because it's very hard to get an Aatrox 2-star while having, you know, item slots open, because Slayer decks usually use Zed and Kled, so they usually roll at low levels, you don't really roll at high levels, making it very difficult for Aatrox to come online. But I do recommend going for double Titans and IE. You want to go full damage because like Aatrox with full damage does a lot of damage, and attack speed is pretty fast as well too. Ari is the Source champion. She actually has enough DPS to one-shot enemy backline once she gets her third ultimate online with 8 Sorks. If you don't have 8 Sorks, I don't really recommend using her too much. You just need to give her 1 blue buff and she's going to ult instantly. And when she ults, she also plays Mana Reave, which can be very tricky for your opponents to deal with. Now we have Senna. You want to make sure to give Senna Guinsus and Shojins because her ultimate has one of the best values in the game. She always gives at least 3,000-4,000 shield value per ultimate because she shields the entire team while doing damage to the entire enemy team. And allies hit by the shield do get plus bonus attack speed as well too, making her one of the best supports in TFT Set 9. Sion is more of a body bag. You just want to CC the backline and respond there just by time. There are some fun damage tricks that you can do with them, but usually it's just better to give it to AD carries. Velvet is very questionable because sometimes she can pop off without dying and she will do like infinite damage. But if she doesn't pop off, sometimes she just like gets burst down instantly. So I would only recommend Velvet within 8 Void composition. Itemizations don't really matter like too much. And Rise has 10 different ultimates, and as you play the game you'll find out each and every single one of them is really strong, except for maybe Bandle City, which like Syndra set 8's ult where she like pulls a unit from the bench. That could be really good with K'Sante though, however. But Rise's ultimate have a very long CC duration, a high damage output, or a lot of healing and shield value. So I do recommend using Rise whenever you have space to use him. He is very valuable, and that is it for the summary. Hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this information here will help you guys grow and improve your gameplay, and I'll see you guys all on set 9. Good luck guys, have a nice time.